All right. Um, Welcome to today's webinar. Delta-8 THC has serious health risks. This is sponsored by the Chequamegon Coalition on Emerging Drugs. We are planning on an hour and a half presentation today. Again, we're recording and we'll be posting the recording or the link to the Facebook page, Chequamegon Coalition on Emerging Drugs. Tasha McFadden will also have a link to the recording as well. My name is Shannon Esla. I'm a member of the coalition and will be assisting Nick today on Zoom with the questions as they come through. Tasha is unable to be here today. Please keep your microphones on mute and put your questions in the chat box. And now to our speaker. After attending a prior training on Delta-8, I'm really thrilled to introduce Officer Nick Place. Nick Place is a 20-year law enforcement veteran in Northeast Wisconsin. He has been a drug recognition expert since 2004. He has multiple instructor certifications, and he is a regional coordinator for the Wisconsin DRE program. Nick has testified as an expert in impaired driving cases, mentored and trained new instructors, and has won statewide awards as a top 10 DRE outstanding performance as a DRE and DRE of the year. He has worked a variety of assignments throughout his career, ranging from routine patrol to drug investigations, interdiction, SWAT, and canine handler. He started Route 961 training and consultants to deliver drug training to law enforcement and to the public. And so without further ado, Officer Nick Place.
All right. Well, thank you, Shannon, and thank you to the I'm going to butcher it, Chequamegon Drug Coalition, Ashland County Drug Coalition. How about that? Because then I don't have to find
Chequamegon.
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 I'm just going to say Ashland County, just because I'll have a. But yeah, thanks to you folks for inviting me here today. And as Shannon said, that this is a presentation on Delta-8 THC and novel THCs made from hemp. I like the term novel tetrahydrocannabinols because Delta-8 to me is a generic term that covers many aspects of tetrahydrocannabinol that's now made from hemp. So I'll explain to you the process of how this works and how these different tetrahydrocannabinols have been made, but it's not just Delta-8 THC anymore. There's also other ones that are on the horizon. So now that the hemp industry and CBD retailers and gas stations and smoke shops, et cetera, have tested the waters with Delta-8 THC from hemp, now you're starting to see other products made from hemp, other THC products made from hemp that are now hitting the market. So if you hear tetrahydrocannabinols such as Delta-6 THC, Delta-10, THCO, THCV, there's many others out there that are now coming out of the market. Now that the waters have been tested, these products have gained a lot of popularity. CBD businesses are being kept open because of the popularity of these products. Now you're starting to see other THC compounds come out and sold to the public here. And a lot of it is being advertised as legal THC. So essentially legal marijuana. I'll give you my contact information here. If you have any questions, I do try to get back with emails within 24 hours. So if you need a quick response, the DRE11379@gmail.com is a good email to get a hold of me. If you send one to my work email, just keep in mind, I don't check it unless I'm at work. So if I'm off for a few days, you might not get a response for a few days, but it is there. Again, I work for the city of Manitowoc PD, was born and raised here. I love Manitowoc, though I have made it, I was telling Shannon prior to coming on here, I have made it up to Ashland. I went up to the Apostle Islands once, and that you guys have a very, very beautiful area up there. A little too cold for me though. Manitowoc's a little too cold, but Ashland County definitely a little colder than I prefer. I also do a podcast too, and I try to do this as time allows, called Poking Around. You can find that anywhere where podcasts are broadcast. I also put out a little disclaimer here before I get going. I'm not going to do anything to put you folks in any type of uncomfortable position. I'm kind of a guy that I call it as I see it, but just keep in mind, if there are any concerns, or if there's any problems that come up, please get a hold of Shannon or I, and we can address that. But again, my goal is not to make anybody uncomfortable, but some of the things here, this particular trend is relatively new. There are things that we're trying to learn about this trend. I'll explain to you what some of those concerns are. And a lot of these new novel THCs that have come out are outside of the manual. We haven't really just put them in the manual yet for like the drug recognition expert program. And if you're unfamiliar with a DRE, if you hear me use the acronym DRE, what I mean by that is a drug recognition expert. So I know up in Ashland County, you guys have a few of those. What a DRE is we are trained to look for impaired drivers by a drug other than alcohol. All right. So there's 7 drug categories that we look for. Today, we're going to focus on the cannabis drug category. But again, there's 6 other ones, and but today's focus is going to be just on cannabis. So, and there's my Chuck Norris. I like Chuck Norris and all the memes out with Chuck Norris out there. So anyway, we'll just kind of keep going on. But if you do have any problems or complaints, just let one of us know. So, all right. So in a nutshell, here you see a picture of a dumpster fire, and like, Nick, that's a little excessive, but really, in our state right now, we don't have a lot of regulation or enforcement of these tetrahydrocannabinols that come from hemp. That's the position of our state government, is that Delta-8 THC and some of these other novel THCs from hemp are legal under the hemp bill. And we'll explain that here in a little bit, why that is. But the complaints that I received from many of you from coalitions across the state, along with many law enforcement, is that there's little to no enforcement. And it's really tough to enforce some of these. The current state with our hemp laws is tough to enforce. I'll explain to you too some of the issues with laboratory testing. And some of my colleagues in the Dane County area have told me now that some of the hemp stores and smoke shops down there are openly selling Delta-9 products, which is essentially, if you hear the term Delta-9 THC, what we're referencing is marijuana. Delta-9 THC is the active cannabinoid, the psychotropic cannabinoid in marijuana that gets people high. So now we're starting to get complaints about those products being sold down there. And I had one colleague in the Dane County area said that she brought it to the attention of their district attorney's office, and they want nothing to do with it. So as far as the enforcement goes, if people are now openly selling marijuana, and our state has, I get times are changing, but we still have laws that say that marijuana is illegal, but they're not willing to enforce Delta-9 THC out of these shops, then there are no rules. And now you're starting to see, in the next slide, I'll show you some of the consequences of when you don't take action on things. People do whatever they want, and the implications then for many coalitions such as yours, and with goals of keeping these products out of the hands of adolescents. So we're going to talk a little bit today about how Delta-8 is made. It's they use isomerization techniques from hemp and CBD. So what they do is they take hemp, they isolate CBD to a 99.9% purity, and then convert it using isomerization from CBD into Delta-8 THC. The reason why they do that, it's very cost effective, it's cheap, and it's the best process that these manufacturers have to do that. So we'll explain that process so you have an understanding of how that works. Just know that there is no magical Delta-8 tree or Delta-8 THC plant. Okay, Delta-8 THC is found in very small concentrations in cannabis. So if manufacturers were going to make Delta-8 THC from hemp, they would need a boatload, literally a boatload of hemp from to extract that Delta-8 THC. So it's much more cost effective for the manufacturers to isolate CBD and then convert it, because it's much more abundant in the cannabis plant, especially with a lot of your hemp varieties, than Delta-8 THC is. There are claims that Delta-8 and other novel THCs are not as psychotropic. Some of them, the claims are that they're more psychotropic than marijuana. For example, if you hear the tetrahydrocannabinol named THCO, that one is marketed to be 3 times as potent as marijuana. But here's the catch. There is no research, validated research, peer-reviewed studies that prove that that's the case. But what you'll find out is that many who go to these smoke shops and CBD stores, they don't really care about research. What they do care about is the marketing. And the marketing for these products is that, like, for example, THCO is 3 times as potent as marijuana. So that's why you see people flock and buy these things. So the federal government, I'll talk to you a little bit about some things I saw on Yahoo. So Yahoo was spreading some fake news about the feds cracking down or feds considering Delta-8 and other novel THCs illegal. That is false. That's a fake news. We'll talk about that here. Other states, Michigan, for example, last week considers Delta-8 THC. They don't want those products being processed in the state of Michigan. Other states, Iowa, Nevada, and others consider Delta-8 THC illegal, or in some of those recreational states, Delta-8 and other novel THCs are considered the same as marijuana. And again, in Wisconsin, no age restrictions on sales to minors. No age restrictions. That just baffles me. So if you look up our state statute on hemp, which is 94.55, or under state statute 961.32, chapter 961 covers drug laws, controlled substances in the state of Wisconsin. If you look at those statutes, you will find nothing regarding sales to minors. And now with this evolution of novel THCs made from hemp, I think that's a problem. Okay. In 20 years in law enforcement, I can't tell you how many times we've had issues with gas stations, etc., selling tobacco and alcohol to minors. And then there were consequences. People got tickets for doing that, right? Now those same places are entrusted to keep these novel THC products out of the hands of youth with no consequences. And when I do, I know a lot of your coalitions do environmental scans and go from, smoke shop to CBD store to gas stations to see what these different places are selling. We're entrusting the same people who can't follow alcohol and tobacco compliance checks to then not allow people under the age of 21 or 18 to buy these novel THC products. And it just baffles me and I go in and I ask them what their process is, and they say, "Oh, officer, I assure you we're checking IDs." Well, you're supposed to be checking IDs too for tobacco and alcohol compliance checks, which you're not doing, and there's a penalty for it. Now we're going to trust that you're not going to sell Delta-8 THC products to kids when there's no consequence if you do. Something needs to change. And I think a lot of you in these coalitions agree with me on that. And then lastly, we'll talk again about some of the chemistry and chromatography that goes into testing these products. But long story short, the hemp world is in an unregulated industry. It's the Wild West. So don't trust any labeling. What's on the labeling or what's in the bottle may contain what's on, or what's on the label may contain what's in the bottle. It may not. Don't trust any labeling that's out there. And I see we have a question up here. So if you do have questions, please let me know and I'll try to answer these as we go along. We'll be able to have a PDF copy of the slides. Absolutely. I will make a PDF copy and send that out to Shannon. All right. So continuing on here. All right. So this is a problem that we're seeing down in my neck of the woods. This is a CBD vending machine. So any Tom, Dick, or Harry can go to one of these vending machines here in our area. We're starting to see these. I first heard of these showing up in the Shawano area. Green Bay and Appleton are telling me that they're also seeing these vending machines show up. So when I first heard about this past winter, I know an officer in the Shawano area, and I asked him, "Hey, would you mind going over and, have you heard of these?" And he said, "Sure." And I said, "Hey, would you mind going over to where you guys have these and just take a picture for me?" He said, "Absolutely." And about a half hour later, I got the picture back that you see here. And I looked at this, and if you're familiar with THC products and the cartoon characters and some of the labeling that goes on there, they're very much geared towards youth, adolescent, young adults, right? There's cartoon characters, there's plays off of common food products, for example, Sour Patch Kids. There's variations of the Sour Patch labeling that goes on these THC products, and it's very much geared towards youth and young people. So when I saw this picture here, I looked and I like, if that, to me, the bottom part of this vending machine looks like they're selling Delta-8 THC vapes. I mean, I could just look at the labeling, and sure enough, I blew up the picture, and there it is. They're selling Delta-8 tetrahydrocannabinol vapes out of the vending machine. There's no regulation. Again, nobody at the counter checking it. So if you go up there with $50, you could buy Delta-8 vapes straight out of the vending machine. We'll talk about this later, but a lot of the Delta-8 products also contain Delta-9 or marijuana inside of them. So we're selling these products out of a vending machine. I don't think we learned any lessons, okay, from the 1980s. I grew up in the 1980s, And I remember going, seeing cigarette vending machines on the outside of gas stations and taverns, and people would put in a couple bucks or whatever it was for a pack of cigarettes, and you could buy. And of course, kids went in there and did the same thing, right? And we haven't learned a single lesson from the 1980s. And now we're starting to see these vending machines show up. So when I talk to school resource officers or principals, guidance counselors, except teachers, they tell me, and I'm sure it's the same where you folks are from up north in the northern part of the state, that there's an immense amount of these vape cartridges showing up in high schools. And this is the problem right here, is that there's no there should be at least some type of regulation to not allow these products to be sold in this type of environment. There should be some type of compliance check to limit the sales of this to underage people. And I'm being told by people in the Brown County area that they've had a couple of these broken into. Folks I spoke to in the Milwaukee area have yet to see these show up in their neck of the woods. Maybe because some of these in the Brown County area are getting broken into and the cartridges are being stolen. Maybe they don't want to test their luck in Milwaukee, but this is probably a trend. If you're, like I was talking to Shannon a little bit before we started up here, and now you guys, especially being so close to Michigan, some in the Ashland area, I guess you guys have a CBD store or a smoke shop that are selling these products. You may see one of these vending machines show up in your neck of the woods in the near future. So we'll see the same thing with vaping products and flavors. Would you mind just kind of elaborating a little bit more with as far as the flavors go? There are different flavors that are out there, but most of that goes with some of the nicotine is the more flavored stuff, though there are ways, if you watch YouTube, that you could take your THC compounds, THC vapes, and you can add flavoring to them. But if you wouldn't mind, I just want to make sure I'm answering your question correctly. All right, so we'll kind of move on here. Again, our Delta-8 THC products produced from hemp. So again, they're using isomerization. So they're essentially taking the CBD molecule and then changing it, converting it to Delta-8 THC. Isomerization, I guess, I'm not a chemistry guy, but it's a pretty common technique. Anybody with a college education and probably even a high school understanding of chemistry can understand isomerization, but then some of the processes involved here, I guess it's really not too hard once you understand what you're doing. But there are some problems involved in it if you don't understand the byproducts of isomerization, some of the harmful byproducts and chemicals that are with isomerization. If you don't know what to look for, you can pass that on to the end user and cause some health effects to that. And we'll talk a little bit later today about FDA warnings on Delta-8 products and other novel THC. But the mason jar you see on the bottom of your screen, a lot of the Delta-8 products, especially the vapes that you're going to come across, are going to have a very light amber color or clear color consistency to it. Okay, we're going to talk about the viscous consistency of the vapes and knowing what to look for. But most of the color, not all, but most of the color to the Delta-8 THC vapes that you're going to come across are going to be like, again, that light amber, very light amber color, if not clear color to it, compared to a marijuana hash oil vape that has a very unique, a very clear amber color to it. And we'll again show some videos of what some of that stuff looks like here. Yeah, referring to how vaping products coming in thousands of different flavors that are geared towards both. Yeah, vaping is the same thing, right? So a lot of that, again, the marketing, the labeling, etc., is geared towards youth, and that it's not as harmful as tobacco. And I think I'll share some slides at the end as far as the harmful effects of vaping. But I attended a presentation once put on by Your Choice to Live, and they had a pediatrician doctor who dealt with a lot of vaping injuries that she saw in youth, and a lot of the youth that had harmful injuries from vaping. They're very heavy vapors, and some of them needed lung transplants. Some of them, they're 20 years old. They had the lung capacity of like an 80-year-old because of the damage that's done from some of the vaping compounds. But yes, they are, you're absolutely correct, marketed towards younger people, as most other things are too. I think, long story short, they need to tone down the packaging a little bit, and something needs to be done about that to keep it out of the hands of youth, at least not make it as attractive. Kind of like what they did with cigarettes in the last 30 years. Okay, so what I'm going to show you here is a short video. It's a longer video on YouTube, but I condensed it down to about 6 minutes. So what this gentleman's going to do is he's going to explain to you how they extract the trichomes. The trichomes of the cannabis plant is where all the good stuff, all the cannabinoids, and all the tetrahydrocannabinols are on the cannabis plant. So the first step to making Delta-8 THC is you need to get the trichomes off of the plant where all the CBD is, right? So again, there's no magical Delta-8 plant. So the first step is the extraction. Now, what he's going to be doing here is talking about, they have marijuana here. Okay, so it's just a different type of cannabis that they're going to be using, but it's the same process. The machine that he has here is a carbon dioxide supercritical extraction. So it's a very fancy machine, probably cost, and I've 5-10 years ago, these cost $250,000. So they might be a little bit more now, but it's a pretty fancy setup. But he's going to talk to you again how this works and explain the process that they use at their facility.
This system is fully automated. We use a canister and we load the material directly into the canister.
So it's all,
pull the pin.
A lot of marijuana in there.
This gets turned 1/6 of a turn. And then out it comes. And then the canister gets loaded in. So what I want you to do is I want you to come over here.
You want me to run it?
Yeah. I want you. This is really, really difficult.
Okay.
I want you to press that button there.
The start cycle button.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Oh.
Done.
All right, so this is the first part of the process. This yellowish amber color substance that come out. These are the trichomes being removed from the plant. So all that plant material that he had in there, used carbon dioxide. It's a supercritical state. He kind of explains it a little bit. And this is the first part that to make vapes or edibles or other types of concentrates, you need to get this off of the plant, and that's what he's doing to collect it here. He's going to talk a little bit here about moisture content as well and how that affects the end product as well.
How much flour did that come from?
The capacity that we can put in here depends upon the grind of the material, which largely depends upon the dryness of the material.
Gotcha.
This particular material was unusually dry. It was only 8% moisture content.
Okay.
Typically, we see between 5% and 25%. The more water that's in it, the more it slows down the process and affects the outcome in a variety of different ways. This was very dry, and as such, what came out was not as typically foamy as you would normally see. And so it's also quite fluid.
This is
So
alcohol
next time,
mixed
he's talking
with
about
that
winterization,
product.
so they're
Just
adding
de-wax.
alcohol to
Just
separate the
de-wax that.
cannabinoids from
So the
plant
alcohol
material.
in the freezer, it pulls up the waxes, and then you can just scoop it off the top, or
Put it in a freezer, get it cold.
It does
it helps
create
it separate.
You can start to see it.
Oh yeah, different
Okay.
layers there.
There are different layers there.
Yeah.
Okay? And because then what will happen is we will then run it through a filtering process. We're not doing any filtering right now, but we have these filtering devices.
Right, so he's talking a little bit about
We'll
filters.
filter.
We'll talk about
We
there's
have
different types
size
of filters. He kind of
different
explains it a
kinds of
little bit.
filters, different filter porosity. We're ready to rotor that. All right. So if you look at this, This is
And he's got a
our
distillation machine over there.
clarified
Talks about
solute.
alcohol. He's got a rotovap
So
on the other
this is
side.
cannabinoids in alcohol that has been clarified through our filtering clarification process. And then that is drawn into the rotovap, and we rotovap out the alcohol, right? And the alcohol we collect in here and we reuse. We remove as much alcohol as we can down until there's maybe 4 or 5% alcohol, because if you take it all out, you won't be able to get it out of the jar, right? Out of the vessel.
Too sticky.
Right, out of the flask. So we take it down as far as we feel comfortable. Again, let's say it's maybe 4 or 5%, and then we put it into a vac oven to purge the alcohol. And again, it's typically 3 to 5 days at a low temperature to remove the alcohol. Okay, so that's
So he's going to talk about terpenes in a little bit. Terpenes are what give marijuana its
The
flavor and
clarified
aroma. There's
absolute.
probably 2,000 different
amazing.
varieties
Okay.
of cannabis with different terpenes
never seen
in
more
it.
than
He
140
talks about
degrees
Blue
Fahrenheit.
Dream here, but talks about adding terpenes back in.
We have
And
some
if you go to a
customers
dispensary
who
near you,
like
they will
to
talk your
add
ear off about terpenes,
terpenes.
the different flavors and aromas of different
Mango's
types
a
of
favorite,
marijuana or
and
cannabis
so
that are out.
again, here's some of the clarified absolute. This one's Blue Dream.
Yeah, those smell incredible.
Yeah, they do, huh? And when we add terpenes, it's maybe a 1%, something like that.
I think he mentions here too, this is a first step for making vape cartridges, so cannabis, and it's gonna, again, most of your marijuana vape oil is compared to the clear light amber color that you saw earlier with Delta-8. Your marijuana is going to be more of this amber color that you see here with this particular bowl that he's got here. This is what you would tell the difference between marijuana and Delta-8. One down and dirty way to do that. So yeah, those are the vape cartridges for marijuana. You can make gummies out of them. Again, what's nice about that process that he has there, a lot of the people that I've come across who eat, like make marijuana edibles, make their own brownies and such, what they don't like about it is the taste of the marijuana in their edibles. With this process here, if you remove the terpenes, so it doesn't have any flavor or aroma to it, these particular edibles here don't taste like marijuana, and people like them, and then they get high off of them, pretty high off of them as well. All right, so okay, so we saw the extraction method that they used there. Again, the trichome part of the plant, it's going to be the sticky residue that you have on marijuana. So this picture here on the bottom left has been blown up to kind of show you what that looks like. But if you come across marijuana or go to a dispensary, if you look really close at the plant material, you'll see the trichomes, again, the sticky part of the plant. Sometimes they're referred to the crystals of the plant. If you follow social media, that's what they'll talk about. They love to talk about marijuana and how many crystals that they have on the bud. So on the flower of the plant. So, and then from the extract, you saw the supercritical carbon dioxide extraction method there, where they get carbon dioxide, like he explained, carbon dioxide between a solid or gas state and a liquid state it's in that supercritical state. Here, the method that this gentleman is using is called a butane hash oil extraction. So they're using butane as the extraction method. The bad part about butane is a carcinogen. Okay, so that butane is going to stay in that plant material. You're not ever going to get all of it out. And there's many in the cannabis world that are concerned about the potential side effects of using a butane hash oil extraction like you see here, because of the butane that can be left over in the cannabis concentrate product that could have some health implications for end users. Okay, so he talked a little bit about winterization in there. He had a freezer with different jars of the cannabis solution in the freezer mixed in with alcohol. The reason for that is you start to separate the lipids and plant material from your miscella or your cannabinoid solution. Okay, so that's an important step in, you'll see in home operation, in clandestine operations, you'll see people put this stuff in their freezers to help that separation. When I went to the High Times Cannabis Cup in Flint, Michigan in 2019, what some of the vendors told me what they did, instead of using the freezer like this guy did, what they use is dry ice. They like dry ice because they said the colder you can get that solution, that alcohol solution, the better separation you're going to get of that plant material, lipids, chlorophyll, all that stuff from the miscella that you use later on in your process. So they like dry ice because dry ice you can get, again, it's pretty, I don't know what the temperature is, but it's pretty cold, and you that colder temperature will help your separation process. And all these little tips and tricks that you can do is needed because that's going to help you get to that 99.9% purity that you're looking for with this. And I didn't talk about it when I was on the previous slide, but when you get any cannabinoid, CBD, THC to 99.9%, it's going to have a crystalline like appearance to it. Okay, it's almost going to look like, for comparable, little bits of methamphetamine. That's when there's no plant material, no terpenes, no nothing in that plant material. It's going to have a very crystalline appearance. Okay, and you got to take these steps here to get to that final product. So filtration, he talked about the different filtration devices that he used. If you go to any hemp expo, there's always a couple booths at like the Milwaukee Hemp Expo, the Madison, Wisconsin Hemp Expo is supposed to be off the charts. I'm told it's one of, I've never been there yet. I would like to go sometime, but I'm told that one is really good. But if you go to any of these hemp expos, there's always a couple booths with different filtration devices, and you get what you pay for. So you can get a cheaper version, and it depends on what you're trying to make, but there's other filtration devices that are in the tens of thousands of dollars. All right, so he talked a little bit about that in his video, decarboxylation. Okay, so if he's making vapes, he might not be using decarboxylation in his step, but it's other Delta-8 THC products may use decarboxylation. So what that is when CBD and THC on the plant, when it's on the plant, it's an acid form. Okay, so you're not going to get high off of it. Hasn't been converted in the case of like Delta-9 or marijuana. You have to convert it from acid to Delta-9 THC to get high. So it looks cool on Super Troopers to eat a whole bag of weed and then start hearing voices in your head. But if you eat a little bit of marijuana, there probably isn't enough Delta-9 THC in there to get the high that you're looking for. So what you have to do is decarboxylate it. So when people smoke marijuana, that process of adding heat through combustion is enough to convert that acid into the Delta-9 THC. It moves one of the molecules off a carboxy chain and the molecule, and then thus you have Delta-9 THC. So to do that here, if you learn how to make marijuana edibles, they'll talk in length about decarboxylation and how that works. It's as much of an art as it is a science to do that. But the tip to do that is low and slow. So you need a low temperature for a slow duration, because if you have a high temperature, you're going to burn your weed and you're not going to have a good end product. And if you don't get it long enough, you're not going to completely decarboxylate all the potential THC. So you may only convert half of the THC acid into actual Delta-9 THC. So again, there's a little bit of an art form into this too. And a lot of the vendors that I spoke to at the High Times Cannabis Cup, so they spent there's a lot of trial and error to get it down to. When they started out, they may have only converted maybe 60% or 70% of their THC acid into Delta-9 THC, but over time they got really good at it and they could get in the upper 90%. Okay, similar to vapes. Good question here. This industry is unregulated, correct? Anybody can make CBD Delta-8. Do you even have to have state license other than a license to charge sales tax? There is a little bit of a regulation. The state, under the previous law, there was a pilot project. You had to go through the state to get a license to just get involved with making hemp or be in the hemp industry. And then there was a yearly license on top of that. And you had some testing requirements where you had to send samples to the state for testing. Now that process is gone and we're under federal law. So there's different parts of the I think it's the 2019 Agricultural Improvement Act, where the process now in the federal hemp bill is defined, and processors have to go through the federal government and send their products off for testing there to make sure that doesn't have enough Delta-9 in it, and that they're following the hemp regulations. The bad part about that is On the retail side of things, there really isn't any enforcement, other than maybe a couple of local law enforcement agencies that go to different smoke shops and hemp stores to make sure that that the stores are on the up and up. I can tell you a lot of police chiefs and sheriffs, like metro drug units, a lot of drug units, they're too busy worrying about methamphetamine and heroin and fentanyl that and it's a lot of headaches dealing with some of these companies, and some of them just don't do it. Or I did I did a little project of my own in CBD, and I found one hemp store in Northeast Wisconsin was selling hemp with 7 times the amount of THC that should have been in that hemp product. And I told an officer in that area who I know, like, hey, this is what's going on. And his district attorney said, we don't even want to deal with this. Like, don't even bring it up to us. So again, it's the district attorneys per the state law, that state statute 94.55, they're supposed to be dealing with these problems that come up, but many of them don't want to deal with it because they got other things going on. And thus, when there are no laws and no enforcement, people are allowed to do whatever they want to do, which is why you're seeing the CBD vending machines show up across the state. Distillation. So you had a distillation machine there. There's many different types, but it also helps with the separation, and then crystallization. So he didn't go through this step with his process, but they could take a couple extra steps here to get that solvent to the purest form of the cannabinoid that it can get. So once it's to that 99.9% consistency and it's crystallized, then you have pure CBD, and then you could begin your next step. So again, some of the equipment that you saw with that video, these are some pictures that I took at the High Times Cannabis Cup, some of the rotovap and the distillation machine that you saw that gentleman had. This machine here, this pressure cookie thing that you see on the right, that is if you did a butane hash extraction, this machine here is supposed to help you get rid of the butane in your product. Okay, supposed to. When I go to the National DRE conference every year, I enjoy going to it. And there are some on the national level who believe you're just not going to get all that butane out of your product. So that's going to end up in with the end user. And a lot of this stuff is lipophilic. Okay, some of the cannabinoids are lipophilic. Butane is lipophilic. What that means, lipophilic, is that it's attracted to fat cells. Your brain is made up of 60% fat. And cannabinoids also like to go wherever in your body there's fat stored. Okay. It doesn't cannabinoids don't like water. They don't like to hide out in the blood that often, but they love fat cells. So there's some theories out there that you might see people down the line with some brain cancer if they're heavy concentrate users because of the butane and some of these other byproducts that are added to these cannabinoid or these concentrate products. This gentleman here, this machine setup, this is for making vapes. He said that this middle flask thing here, you could shut your machine down briefly to switch out the flask, and his machine costs more because of that unique feature, where other machines you have to completely shut down your product. So there's, again, a big industry that's, with making cannabis products, your concentrates, and this is just one example of it. But you go to these hemp expos or Delta or the High Times Cannabis Cups, and there are vendors like this all over the place selling some of the equipment. So where I'm going with all this is you got to put a lot of work and effort into making Delta-8 THC or any other concentrate, because there's no magical tree or process. It does take a little bit of work. Okay, so once you have your CBD in its purest form, what do you do to make it? Okay, to convert it from CBD to Delta-8. The video link in here, if you wish to watch it, it's about an hour long. These guys go through. They're from Extract Labs. They were at the High Times Cannabis Cup. I watched some of their videos. They seem to have a pretty good understanding of what they're doing. They seem like a vendor that's on the up and up, and they go through their process and how they convert Delta-8 or CBD into Delta-8 THC. Okay, so they talk about dissolving the CBD in a nonpolar organic solvent. They add some acids to it. They do a stirring process, some other chemicals that are added to it. So the reason I point this out is these are non-cannabis materials that they're using to do their conversion. And I don't think people quite understand. Maybe some of the people in our state, they see the word isomerization and they may think it's a natural part of the plant. This Delta-8 is just a natural occurring part of the plant. But here you see there's a lot of work that goes into then taking that CBD, and there's a lot of work just to get it to that 99.9% purity. And now you're taking some extra steps to take it from CBD into Delta-8 THC using these chemistry techniques here. Now, some states, again, have outlawed this process or considered Delta-8 the same as Delta-9 because of its psychotropic properties, and other states like ours haven't. But again, it's my speculation that maybe some of them don't quite understand how this process works and the work that goes into the conversion. Okay, so I did a little bit when I've heard about Delta-8 THC for a while, but it really didn't get popular again until the hemp bill was legalized. So late 2020, I saw this trend. I saw these products popping up across my part of the state, and I wanted to learn more about them. So I bought some and I sent them off for testing at a laboratory. And I'll explain again a little bit some of the issues that come up with laboratory or that have come up. Okay, this is okay, it's a good question here. This is off topic, but under 346.63 sub 1 AM, which is our restricted controlled substance law, which says that drugs that are illegal, you can't have in your system while driving. A person can be charged with having a detectable amount of a restricted controlled substance in their blood with Delta-9. So Delta-8 not being restricted, I assume you would have to charge under 1A and show impairment. That is the advice that we're given here. In the bulletin that I sent out to Natasha, that Shannon and those will share with you, it's a guide for Wisconsin law enforcement on dealing with Delta-8 THC, and we covered this very topic in that bulletin. So the advice we're giving is we have to show impairment. And I'll talk a little bit about the casework so far with impaired driving cases with Delta-8 THC, but I'll give you a sneak peek. We're not seeing a lot of Delta-8 show up in the cases where Delta-8 THC is suspected. And then I'll explain a little bit more later on in the presentation why it's a speculation why we're seeing that. Okay, so with this particular vape, you see on the right hand side, this is what I sent off for testing. The results came back. If you're not familiar with how law enforcement deals with narcotics cases, is we have little plastic pouches, reagent pouches. We put a little bit of the controlled substance inside of it. They have it for all different types of controlled substances that we come across. The Duquesnoy Levine is the pouch that we use for THC. So a question comes up from any in law enforcement or those familiar with drug testing procedures: will Delta-8 test positive in the Duquesnoy Levine? And the answer is yes, it will. So I spoke to the manufacturer, and they said that the pouches are designed to test for THC. They will not tell the difference between Delta-8, Delta-9, Delta-6, Delta whatever. It only looks for THC. So you will get a purple, if there's any law enforcement watching, you will get a positive test result with Delta-8 products. Okay. This was the test results, again, not surprising. The results were a little bit different than what the packaging said. So the packaging said there should be 85% Delta-8 THC in the vape cartridge. If you're not familiar with the vape cartridges, they contain approximately 1 gram of oil, or 1,000 milligrams. So this one came back a little bit higher at 91.2%. Again, down and dirty way, if you want to tell the difference, if you work part of your coalition, you come across somebody where you suspect they have a THC vape and they swear to you up and down, Lord help me, this is not THC, this is nicotine. Okay, a down and dirty way to tell the difference, or it's CBD down. So just take the vape and move it upside down, and you see how viscous this vape is. That bubble inside does not move at all. That is consistent with tetrahydrocannabinol. So Delta-9, Delta-8, so marijuana hash oil, Delta-8, your other THC, novel cannabinoids, they are very viscous. They don't move at all. Okay, and again, the Delta-8 is going to have that lighter amber color to it as compared to your marijuana hash oil, where it's a lot darker amber color. So just tip the vape upside down. That's a real down and dirty way to tell the difference between the two. And here on the left is a CBD vape. Now that is very aqueous. You know, if you take your nicotine vapes and you tip them upside down, very aqueous. You see that bubble moves pretty freely on the inside of it. That was one that I bought at a Green Bay store, I think in 2019. And the one on the right is a marijuana hash oil vape that we took off of somebody when we were training new drug recognition experts in Milwaukee. So notice again the contrast there, darker amber colored and a very viscous solution on the inside of it. So again, down in, if you come across somebody, you think they're lying to you, just take the vape cartridge, turn it upside down, and then if the solution doesn't move, you're likely dealing with a tetrahydrocannabinol. If it's a lighter color, might be one of these newer novel THCs. If it's darker amber color, like you see on the right, it's likely marijuana. All right, so some gummies that I bought at the same shop. It's supposed to be, they were supposed to be 10 milligrams a piece. They tested positive in the Dukanawaba and they came back at half of the Delta-8 that they should have been at according to the label. So it came back at 4.2 milligrams as opposed to the 10. No other cannabinoids were reported in it. All right, to give you an idea. People that I've spoken to that have taken these, again, it's completely anecdotal, but they said that the gummy, the psychotropic effect that they got from these gummies was comparable to marijuana gummies that they had taken in legal states. So one person in particular that took these particular Delta-8 gummies said she had taken marijuana gummies when she went on a trip to California. She liked the psychotropic effect that she got. We'll talk a little bit about some of the sexual side effects that people that take, especially females that take marijuana gummies. One of the pleasurable side effects is the euphoria that they get and the increased libido from taking marijuana edibles. And she said when she took these Delta-8 edibles, she had the same euphoric and libido effects that she had when she took the marijuana edibles in California. So it kind of gives you some comparisons if you want. I'll talk a little bit about some concerns I have with sexual predators using cannabis to entice with child sex cases and using edibles in this circumstance here. But if you go on High Times or Leafly or some of these other marijuana publications and talk about edibles and libido, they will tell you plenty of information if you want to spice up your sex life to insert some marijuana edibles into your life. So there's other types of Delta-8 THC products out there. So if you heard me talking at the beginning of the presentation, I said there is no magical Delta-8 THC plant out there. So how do you make, you see products that are Delta-8 THC flower or the plant material, how do they make that? So, one, the person could be lying to you. It does happen. People do lie to authority figures. So it could actually be a bag that says Delta-8 THC, when in fact it's marijuana. But if it's a true Delta-8 THC product, what could be the case is what manufacturers usually do is they take hemp flower, so a CBD or CBG or some other non-psychotropic cannabinoid dominant flower, and then they spray Delta-8 THC on it. So the visc, they'll spray it on the flower and then people smoke it. It's really a preference. Some people prefer to smoke flower, some prefer the vapes or gummies. It's again, but they're trying to meet different customer demand. So some of the here, okay, I had a screen pop up. Shannon, if something comes up here, it's something about my internet connection. So please let me know if something comes up. But anyway, so going back to that, in that brochure that I handed out to you guys, it goes into the different studies that went into the vaping compounds that get added to it. There's been quite a bit of debate in the cannabis world whether they should add the natural terpene solution to the flower to make it a better product for the end user, or if they should be using vaping compounds, things that you may be familiar with, like propylene glycol. The bad part about propylene glycol is that it's a carcinogen when it's burned at certain temperatures. So it forms formaldehyde and other carcinogens when it's heated to a certain temperature. So the bad part of that, again, for the end user, I really do believe you're going to see, we don't have the long-term data yet on vaping, but propylene glycol is not a good thing inhaled in your lungs, that it does cause health effects. And many in the cannabis world understand that. And they said, hey, listen, some of them are crusaders for medical cannabis. And they're like, listen, how can we sell products to the end user that we claim is for medicinal purposes, but we're adding chemicals like propylene glycol and other vaping compounds that we know are carcinogenic. And now we're giving that to people and we claim it's medicinal. Like, that doesn't make any sense. And there's quite a bit of a war online with those who believe in cannabis as medicine versus those who are out to make a quick buck on not adding those vaping compounds and instead using more of an organic, natural cannabis product to it, again, using terpenes and other natural things to thin that viscous solution out so they can spray it on there. So keep that stuff in mind. And again, I put on that handout that I gave to law enforcement and that I'm shared with you, I did put some links to some studies, including one from Portland State University, where they detail how that process occurs. Okay. And then you can find other Delta, just like any other concentrate that you would find in any marijuana dispensary, different concentrates, waxes, shatters, butter, again, things that the customer wants the hemp industry is matching that, what you would find with what you would find in a marijuana dispensary. They're making the same Delta-8 THC products. Okay. Again, other THC products, I mentioned some of them. You're going to hear, so if you hear any of these weird ones and you're like, oh, I've never heard of Delta-10 THC, what the heck is that? Instead of using CBD to convert into Delta-8 THC, they're just converting it to Delta-10 or Delta-6. Okay. There's, again, another one that I heard is on the up and up is THCV. That one's supposed to be 5 times stronger than marijuana. It's supposed to have, instead of marijuana has 5 carbon chains on its molecule. THCV is supposed to have 7, and it's supposed to have a stronger psychotropic effect than marijuana. Again, none of this has been peer reviewed. None of it's been studied. So, is it truly 5 times stronger than marijuana? We really don't know, because there's no peer reviewed data on it. But the marketing is there, and people care about the marketing. And if you tell them that this is 5 times stronger than marijuana and it's legal, that is what they care about, and that's what they're going to. That's why they're buying it. So I briefly talked about some of the toxicological concerns, and the man on the right is Steve Krejci. He's a DRE state coordinator here in Wisconsin, so he's like my boss on the DRE level. And I'm showcasing his fishing skills compared to my 2 kids, but also, I guess the point of this slide, other than to make fun of Steve, is to show that the concerns on the toxicological. We talked a little bit about restricted controlled substance violations. The chemists right now they don't quite yet know what kind of fish that they have. So is Delta-8 THC the little bluegill that Steve caught, or is it a nice bass that my 2 kids caught fishing? Okay, so again, I explained, some of my investigations so far is that these Delta-8 THC products cause cannabis impairment. If you went to a DITIP class or familiar with cannabis impairment, you are going to see things like red and watery eyes, lack of convergence, some other what else? You may not see heat bumps and maybe a green coating on the tongue if they're smoking from a vape or eating an edible. You might not see some of that kind of thing. Eyelid tremors. Again, things that you've learned in your DITIP classes or other, if you're familiar with cannabis impairment, you are going to see that with these products. Again, nothing has come out that's peer reviewed on Delta-8 that verifies that, but that doesn't mean it's the case. So again, I mentioned before, we're not seeing a lot of Delta-8 come back with the impaired driving arrest. So when somebody gets arrested in Wisconsin and we suspect drugs, or many agencies like mine, we're blood primary. So if we arrest somebody for impaired driving or OWI, my agency, we're blood primary. So we request a blood sample in all cases. So the Wisconsin State Lab of Hygiene, to give you some perspective, tests in that ballpark of 30 to 35,000 samples a year. So a lot of samples. Most of those though are alcohol, but in the drug cases that they've studied, they haven't seen a lot of Delta-8 THC alone when Delta-8 THC was suspected, or when Delta-8 has come back, it's also come back with Delta-9 or marijuana. So why is that? Well, the 2 theories that I think we have going on right now, one, people lie to the police. So they try to tell the police officer that they didn't use marijuana and they used a legal form of THC. So they used Delta-8 when in fact they used Delta-9. Shocking, right? Well, places like Manitowoc, and I'm sure the same thing happens in Ashland. People get in trouble. Like I had a traffic stop recently where the guy tried to pass off that he took Delta-8 THC, and lo and behold, he actually smoked marijuana. Okay, we found some marijuana in his car, and then he later admitted that he smoked marijuana. So that does happen. That could explain somebody trying to pass off that they never used marijuana, and they say that they smoked Delta-8 THC vapes or took a Delta-8 gummy when in fact they smoked marijuana. So that, I think, is a big part of why we're not seeing a lot of that come back. And the other concerns that we have here too, as far as laboratory testing, why we may see Delta-8 THC paired up with Delta-9 is there's some concerns about laboratories not having the proper chromatography to tell the difference between Delta-8 THC and Delta-9. So this is one slide I got off of a website, New Bloom Chromatography, that tests hemp samples for different companies. So again, when companies want to sell their hemp products, they have to get it tested to make sure there's no Delta-9. Well, some of these laboratories aren't doing a very good job at telling the difference between the 2 cannabinoids. So the picture on the left is the company explaining how the Delta-8 and Delta-9 get lumped together. So the Delta-9 isn't being reported on the tox sample here. All right. Versus the picture on the right, the company says that their procedures are on the up and up. And you see that there's two wavy lines in there telling the difference between the two tetrahydrocannabinols. So apparently, in some of the reading that I've done, the DEA is cracking down on laboratories who aren't doing a good job. So, I'm sure it's just like any other business. You try to cut corners, and maybe you go with a laboratory that isn't charging as high of a fee as compared to maybe another laboratory that has better equipment. So you go with the lowest vendor, and the result is that there's Delta-9 mixed in with the Delta-8 THC product, yet the laboratory isn't doing a good job telling the difference between the two. So the anti-user then gets a mix of both Delta-8 THC and Delta-9 because the laboratory didn't do a good job of telling the difference between the two. The retailer or the manufacturer is relying on those laboratory results when in fact that they're not correct. So I don't want to name any laboratories. I know there's one in Wisconsin that is under DEA review. That was according to the Wisconsin Crime Lab. So some of the resources that we have here in Wisconsin, we have to take a second look at here because of the crackdown here from the DEA. But that is out there, and I think, again, we're still learning about this drug trend. It may change, but again, speculation here. One, people lie to the police. Two, the laboratories aren't doing a very good job of telling the difference between the two THCs, and they're lumping them together. And that's why we're not seeing a lot of Delta-8 cases, or the Delta-8 we do see is mixed in with marijuana. All right. So a little bit about how Delta-8 works inside your body. So you have what's called the endocannabinoid system. The theory behind, there's books and all. If you want to go enlighten someone's life at a marijuana dispensary, talk about the endocannabinoid system, you will make their day. They love to talk about marijuana. They love to talk about cannabis as medicine, and the endocannabinoid system feeds into that. So the theory behind the endocannabinoid system is it helps regulate your nervous system, so that people with different medicinal issues. So if you have problems with your stomach, and you see all the dots down, the different blue dots different colored blue dots that you see are different endocannabinoid receptors across the body. So the ones that are THC activates are in the kind of like that Carolina blue color that you see there. And mainly those Carolina blue receptors, those endocannabinoid ones, it's called the CB1 receptors, are in your central nervous system. So your brain, your spinal cord, etc. So, some of the things I talked about here, where most of those cannabinoid receptors are located, are going to be the reward centers of the brain. So, your feel good receptors. So there's a naturally occurring endocannabinoid called anandamide. Well, if you ever get some vigorous exercise and you feel good about it, that's anandamide, or that feel good neurotransmitter being released, and your brain feels pleasure because of the exercise that you get. Well, THC acts on that same receptor site, so it helps that reward center of your brain to help feel better. We talked a little bit about some of the sexual behavior that goes with that. Short-term memory. For field sobriety tests with cannabis, you are going to see short-term memory impairment, especially walk and turn, one leg stand test. I tell police officers learning the walk and turn, or when they learn how to or want to get better at administering the walk and turn test to people under the influence of marijuana, is to watch the turn procedure, because many people, when they do the turn on the walk and turn test, forget what to do. They stop while walking. They forget how to do the test. After several demonstrations, they still have problems remembering and retaining that information. Speed and vigilance, always an issue. The biggest clue or driving cue of marijuana impaired driving is speed. And you hear quite the contrary on many social media reports, that people under the influence of marijuana drive slower. They drive better when they're under the influence of marijuana. The data that's out there is the opposite. People under the influence of marijuana and THC actually drive faster. They get caught for speeding. So some of the data that came out in 2016, and then I think there was a study the next year out of California, showed that upwards of 28% of people that were stopped and arrested for marijuana impaired driving were in fact speeding. It was by far the number one driving cue being the assist or the prompt for the officer to make the arrest. And when I first heard that, I looked back at some of the marijuana impaired driving arrests that I had, and sure enough, most of those were for speeding. So quite contrary to what's the information that's out there. And then vigilance, negotiating terms and things, turns or curves in the roadway. Again, crashes that we seem to have with impaired driving. People go too fast. They can't negotiate the term. They don't have the reaction time. They don't have the coordination to negotiate that turn or that curve in the roadway, and they end up crashing as a result. Okay. This is something I want to share because I did a presentation for a traffic safety conference early in the month. And I also heard this is occurring with Delta-8 products. So this individual here, once upon a time, I worked for the Ripon, Wisconsin Police Department. I really liked working there, and I met my wife, who's also from Manitowoc, so we decided to move back. But when I had my time at Ripon, this gentleman here, whose name is Terry Phelps, he was arrested on child porn charges, and he was sent away to prison. But when he got out, apparently he was up to his old tricks. So what this gentleman did is he solicited 11 and 12-year-old girls for sex, and he used marijuana as his vehicle to do so. So he would tell them that marijuana is harmless, it's medicinal, all this BS, and sexually assaulted them. So there are the Terry Phelps of the world out there, and I warn people, I warn police officers when I train them, like, look, the perception is that marijuana is a harmless drug, but there are predators like Terry Phelps out there that know that will use that information then to prey on young people. And like Terry Phelps did here, giving marijuana, telling them that it's harmless and it's medicinal, and then using that to, again, lower their inhibition and make them do things that they normally wouldn't do when they're high, right? So I explained this at a conference that I had in March. I had an officer come up to me during the break from the central part of Wisconsin, and he said in his area, they actually had somebody doing this. So they had a predator go to a park, try to entice some kids on the playground by saying that Delta-8 THC is legal. It's legal THC. It's like legal marijuana, but you don't get in trouble with it. And he was trying to entice these kids to have sexual contact with them, and they ended up arresting him for that. So just know that, a lot of the runaway cases that we get, we find out that the victims have substance abuse problems, and a lot of that is due to home issues and just a way to cope with it. But some of them do get sexually assaulted, and some of them are under the influence of marijuana when this happens. So I guess the perception of it being a harmless drug, just kind of, my advice is to keep that in mind and know that there are people like Terry Phelps out there that are using that approach. So toxicology, long story short, are you going to, if you take Delta-8 THC, are you going to test positive for marijuana? Yes, you will. So if you are subject to random drug screening, just because Delta-8 THC may be legal where you live, doesn't mean that there wouldn't be consequences for you if your employer tests you for marijuana and you pop positive. It won't matter. All right. So you can tell your boss up and down that, hey, I took Delta-8 THC. It's going to look the same on a random drug screen, because again, the random drug screen that you take is looking for THC. It's not going to be able to tell the difference between the different THC compounds out there. It's not going to tell the difference between Delta-8 and Delta-9. It just looks for tetrahydrocannabinol. Same thing with CBD. Again, it's an unregulated industry. So there is THC in these CBD products, and some of them, I explained to you one instance where I bought some product at a hemp store in Green Bay, and it came back with 7 times the amount of THC in it. Well, I've spoken to many people. There are many stories, including police officers that have taken CBD. They have to go in for a drug screen. They pop hot for marijuana. Okay, it does happen. So again, it's an unregulated industry, and the potential for testing positive, especially if you take Delta-8 or other novel THCs, is high. So just be careful with that. And then there's, again, some of the novel synthetic cannabinoids that show up in a lot of CBD products too. So CBD is supposed to be non-psychotropic. There's been research published by places like Virginia Commonwealth University that study vapes, and they found that people that took CBD end up reporting having adverse effects, including intoxication from taking CBD products. And when they analyzed the particular vapes, they found that there were things like K2 and spice and other synthetic THCs added to those to give that psychotropic effect. So we have a question here. We use saliva test, and it will differentiate. Okay, so if you have that'd be cool. If you, I'm not aware that the oral fluid test that we did, we had an oral fluid project in Manitowoc, and one of those gummies that I showed you, I actually dosed somebody on to look at the impairment, and the oral fluid test that we used, which was the Alere DDS2, The person that took the Delta-8 gummy tested positive for THC with that. So I would be curious if you have a saliva test that can tell the difference between Delta-8, Delta-9 to see what you're using, because I'm not saying you're full of crap or anything like that, but the one saliva test that we used, and machine was pretty expensive, could not tell the difference between the two, provided that the laboratory didn't misreport and there wasn't Delta-9 in the gummy, which we're now finding out that's the case. So maybe the machine you're using, the process you're using can tell the difference and has better technology, or the products are truly Delta-8. Okay, so here, just because we're short on time, so I'll include some of the CBD stuff, but this is some of the CBD that I sent off for testing. And again, I bought this, so early 2020. One thing I learned from the hemp industry is most of the labeling, again, is crap. So this label here said almost 16% CBD in it. The hemp expos I've attended, the growers who actually know what they're doing have said, if you can grow hemp with more than 10% CBD in it, please let me know what kind of magical tricks or gardening techniques that you're using. Maybe they, my grandma was a phenomenal gardener. Maybe they, did a seance with her and got her gardening tricks, because she was great at gardening. But he said, if you can get above 10% CBD, please let me know what you're doing, because it's tough to do. So again, the labeling on here, a lot of it's not true. This one here, it's supposed to be at 0.3% THC, came back at 2.16%. That's enough to get a small, and now it's a very small buzz, but you can get high off of it. And I tell the incoming drug recognition experts that we're training is a lot of the data that we have on cannabis impaired driving came back with government weed, where they administered what we call government weed. So it's basically low THC, so like 3% THC. And we had plenty of documented impairment that was validated in those initial studies that validated our drug recognition expert procedures. The pouch results that are out there, if you come across, I know this is mostly about Delta-8 THC, but some of the CBD stuff out there, if you come across somebody who says that the plant material that they have is hemp or CBD, there are pouches out there that can tell the difference between low THC content cannabis and high THC content. So the one on the left, if it's marijuana, it turns blue. If it's hemp, it turns pink. And the pouch on the left turns blue if it's marijuana, purple if it's hemp. So there are different pouches that are out there. On that, one thing I want to, some groups ask about the TrueNarc scan. If you're unfamiliar with the TrueNarc, again, maybe any law enforcement that may watch this presentation down the line or here today, the TrueNarc device, if you're unfamiliar with it, it's a $30,000 machine. We have one of these at the Manitowoc Police Department. It's a great machine. There are some limitations to it, but a common question I get is, with the TrueNarc machine, can you test Delta-8 THC or to see if there's any marijuana in it? Long story short is no. So what this machine does is it shoots a laser into the product to tell you what you have. So the picture on the left is from the manufacturer's website. They're testing a white powdery substance. So you scan the substance, the laser shoots into it and tells you that it's cocaine, which it's a pretty neat machine. Okay, so the theory is you don't have to go hands-on with it as much. So the questions I get asked, again, can we test vapes and edibles and flour to see if there's any marijuana in it? Long story short is no. I actually tried it myself. So the picture on your right, the first one that says fail was I tried to test a vape, a Delta-8 THC vape, came back fail, so it didn't work. It's not going to work on plant material. And then the one on the right is with the gummies. So the TrueNarc, the manufacturer says not to do it. I tried it anyway, and I still got the fail result. So it's not, long story short, it's not going to work. So don't use the TrueNarc on testing cannabis. So here's our law, our statute on hemp here in the state of Wisconsin. So if you want to, just go Google Wisconsin state statutes, find chapter 94, which covers hemp. So 94.55 goes into the hemp. And again, the big sticking point here and the advice that we are given from the Attorney General's office is that these novel THC compounds are legal because in our state, it only talks about Delta-9 THC, which is marijuana, and not being above 0.3%. Other states, if you look at Iowa, I'm a part of a drug coalition group myself, and I got some information together from other states like the state of Iowa. They don't have, I mean, they do have this language in their statute, but then they also have language covering all tetrahydrocannabinols, not just Delta-9 in marijuana. Okay, so Advice that I would give, hopefully the changes that we see, I don't think I'm not trying to get political or make this political whatsoever, but with the current political climate here in the leadership that we have, I don't think you're going to see any language changes come anytime soon. But if we did, and we wanted to start correct this problem, I think taking the lead that Iowa took and restricting all THCs in cannabis products would be a good first step concerning hemp products, so that this loophole or this gray area gets closed up. But on the federal level, if you go on again on that document that I sent you folks, if you go follow, so I put links to the different the DEA publications that are out there. So if you go look on what's called the orange list, it lists all controlled substances across the country. And if you look under tetrahydrocannabinol, Delta-8 THC is listed there. So there was some debate whether or not these novel THCs were legal when the trend first started. The DEA was pretty clear on their position and said that any synthetically derived THCs. So this process, again, why I put this in there, why I think it's important to explain, is that process of converting CBD into Delta-8. It's a synthetic process. Again, there's no magical Delta-8 plant. Okay, it's a synthetic process to convert CBD into Delta-8 THC. And the DEA has been pretty clear on this, is that when the Agricultural Improvement Act was passed, that the legislative intent of the law was for naturally occurring constituents of the plant. Okay, so naturally occurring THC only. So if you wanted to make Delta-8 THC and you had a boatload of hemp and you extracted all that Delta-8, that very small amount of it, that's okay. But if you're going to use this conversion process with isomerization, that's against the legislative intent of the law. Okay, so they're pretty clear on it. So all synthetically derived tetrahydrocannabinols remain Schedule 1 controlled substances. Schedule 1 controlled substances are illegal. Okay, they're according to the federal government. I get there's debate on whether or not cannabis is medicinal, but according to the United States government, tetrahydrocannabinol has no medicinal value and is highly addictive and illegal. Okay, so it has, that's taken the federal government. I put links in there so you could check, you can read. It's probably 10 pages long. You can read the whole their rule on it. Again, there's some fake news stories out there. I read into it and I looked at their sources, and like Yahoo and others are sourcing cannabis companies and their opinions, which is again quite different. So you may see this stuff out on again, I'm quoting Yahoo Finance, and my take on it's fake news because the federal government has said this synthetic process is illegal. There's currently a lawsuit on the East Coast. I think it's South Carolina. So there's federal district court there. They're deciding right now the hemp and cannabis industries on that part of the country are suing the federal government because they want to make Delta-8 THC illegal, and the federal government is fighting back against it. And there's a lawsuit pending right now. So some of this, again, this is an evolving drug trend. So maybe a month or two from now, the federal court there comes out with a decision on it, and you'll see other courts run with it, and you may see it go to the Supreme Court. There is also some federal legislation pending to clear up this gray area with the Agricultural Act to define these tetrahydrocannabinols. So there is more coming, but right now we're not quite there yet. So other states with restrictions on Delta-8 THC. This is the most recent map that I have found. Texas actually, this map needs to be updated. Texas, they had a Supreme Court ruling there where they said that Delta-8 and other novel THCs are legal according to Texas law. But there's quite a few states here where it is illegal or restricted. And some of those here you see here are recreational marijuana states, places like Washington, Nevada, Arizona, Alaska. These are all places that either consider novel THCs illegal or treat it the same as marijuana. All right, so there's quite a few in there. Okay, so we kind of talked about a little bit about, Wisconsin considers novel THCs legal. So there are some places that are considering maybe a local ordinance on forbidding novel THCs from being sold in their community. So if you are one of those places that is considering that, I spoke to a chief in the northern part of Wisconsin, not too far away from you, that actually tried this, and he was met with some fierce resistance, not from people in his community, but from others across the state who didn't want to see other similar ordinances passed where they lived. Again, most of your smoke shops, your CBD stores, a lot of their business, I've heard up to 60% to 70% of their business is coming off of Delta-8 THC sales. So if you're going to go after this stuff and make it illegal, you're going to take away these people's livelihoods. So the point of Mel Gibson here in his Braveheart attire is expect a battle. If you want to pass this, expect this type of Braveheart. They're gonna come with, I don't know if they're gonna come with paint on their faces and axes and all that kind of business, but they're going to come hot, and they're going to want to make sure that they snuff that out if you try to pass something like that in your community. This is the city of Manitowoc's ordinance on tetrahydrocannabinols. So police officers that I speak to across the state, what I talk to them about is to make sure that their ordinances cover all types of tetrahydrocannabinols, because many places only have ordinances against marijuana. Again, this is an evolving drug trend. It's relatively new. So maybe an ordinance that was drafted 20, 30 years ago may not cover all that needs to be covered here with this evolution of novel THCs made from hemp. Okay. So we're getting a new city attorney here in Manitowoc. This may change, but our previous city attorney was okay if we had evidence of marijuana use and somebody had a Delta-8 THC product. Again, not, it's very possible that there was Delta-9 in these Delta-8 products. They were okay with issuing an ordinance citation on it. In the city of Manitowoc, our ordinance ticket for possession of THC is $439. They were okay, depending on each circumstance was different. But again, they preferred if there was evidence of marijuana use. So if there was marijuana shake, maybe a marijuana pipe or something like that, and they had a product or some like a gummy, some gummies or vape that said that, and the person claimed they were Delta-8 or the packaging said they were Delta-8, they were okay with issuing ordinance tickets on that based on the language in our ordinance. But again, each circumstance in each context is different and each ordinance is different. So what I advise law enforcement, any listening or any coalitions who work with law enforcement, is to check with your local prosecutor and see if this would fit for you. Okay. So we'll wrap up our presentation today talking about some of the safety concerns that come with Delta-8 THC products. So again, the brochure I handed out to you has links to the FDA website where they have shared concerns that they have found through their investigation with novel THCs. The big one is Delta-8 is relatively new and has not been evaluated for safe use. Again, we don't know the long-term side effects of it. Most people don't really care what the FDA has to say. They buy into the marketing of it, that's been shared. High Times Magazine also has shared the same information, by the way. Okay. And Normal is the national organization for the reform of marijuana laws. Okay. They also have the same concerns, and they tell people not to use Delta-8 because it lives in an unregulated industry and the safety of these products have not been evaluated. All right. So when Normal and High Times Magazine tells people not to use Delta-8 THC, I told police officers that's like you turning in another police officer for like misuse of force. Okay. I mean, it's pretty big. People that advocate for legalized cannabis and legalized drug use are telling you not to use Delta-8 THC. That should be a big red flag out there. Okay. Like I tell police officers, that's like you seeing another police officer do something really bad and you turning them in like, time out here. What you did is bad and we're not going to stand for it. Okay. It's the same kind of thing. Adverse effects from Delta-8 THC products. Again, some of these byproducts for this chemical isomerization process, some of these manufacturers, again, some of them are in it for legitimate medicinal purposes. They're crusaders who want medical cannabis. Others are in it to make money, and they're going to cut corners and not do things properly. And there have been some adverse effects, people reporting health issues with that. The psychoactive and intoxicating effects, and that kind of goes hand in hand with the child poisoning complaints. Again, a lot of this stuff, we talked about it earlier, it has marketing and packaging intended for younger people, for adolescents. For example, this past Easter, my kids love candy, right? We have so much candy, we don't even know what to do with it yet. And it adds to dad's waistline. But we especially loved Sour Patch Kids. And I don't know, our taste buds, we just jive with the Sour Patch Kids. And here you see marketing here for Delta-8 products for Stony Patch, right? Now, adults can read this and tell the difference and see the marijuana leaves, but to a 5-year-old who sees this out and who loves Sour Patch Kids, they see this packaging and they might not, they may be able to read some words, but they see this and instantly they think they're eating Sour Patch Kids, and they eat a bunch of these and then they start having adverse effects and hallucinations and such. And I know the old thing out there is that you can't overdose from marijuana like you would from like fentanyl, but still there's been a plenty of emergency room visits from kids who taken marijuana edibles, and then they start having some adverse effects, and mom and dad take them to the emergency room when in fact Junior or little Sally got into mom and dad's edibles and then had side effects. So, that kind of thing is out there. Again, safety concerns. I shared with you a little bit earlier that Your Choice to Live, a group out of Waukesha, a drug prevention group out of Waukesha, they have a lot of online presentations out there. One of the best ones I've seen was a pulmonologist, a pediatric pulmonologist from Wisconsin Children's Hospital, talk about some of the safety things that they have seen from kids who have vaped. Okay, so 20-year-olds with lungs that look like 80-year-olds. So in the brochure I handed out, I put a link in there to the American Journal of Rheumatology. And if I butchered the pronunciation, I apologize. But the long story short here, the white parts that you see inside this person's lungs, that's bad. Okay, that is the side effects from vaping. Okay, and I shared with you earlier, groups like Normal and High Times are advocating do not use Delta-8 because it's an unregulated industry. There's not a lot of safety and compliance checks, and we don't know the long-term data regarding the safety of these products. Okay, people that would make these in clandestine labs, a lot of them have blown themselves up, or they're not following proper safety protocols. We talked a little bit earlier about adding propylene glycol to these. Again, propylene glycol is common in vaping products, and if you heat that up, it will make carcinogens like formaldehyde in there, and then the end user that inhales that. Okay, we have another question. Be referenced today, be shared electronically. Yeah, I do have a PDF version. And again, we kind of put this, I shared it with Shannon here just before the presentation. So she'll make sure, I think Shannon would agree. I see Shannon shaking her head. So she'll share the PDF of the presentation along with the handout that I gave to law enforcement. So, and I do have like little hyperlinks on there. So that I know a lot of people in coalitions, you like having research for different projects, and there'll be plenty of that for you. Okay. Cutting agents. So a cutting agent is something a drug dealer adds to their drug to make more money. Okay, so if I'm a methamphetamine dealer, I'm going to add Epsom salts to my methamphetamine so that I can make my methamphetamine last longer and make more money. Okay, so what we're finding in the clandestine market, black market, and then again, hemp lives in an unregulated industry, is we're seeing vitamin E acetate and other similar viscous compounds added to the hash oil or added to maybe some of these Delta-8 products to stretch out their products so they can make more money. The bad part about vitamin E acetate and other viscous compounds is that they're great for your skin. If you want to make your skin look good, right? Put some vitamin E acetate and similar lotions on there. The bad part about that is it's not good for your lungs. Your lungs were intended to inhale air only. It wasn't meant for propylene glycol. Your lungs weren't meant for vitamin E acetate. And there's been some adverse side effects reported, especially in the Milwaukee area. Again, that links on that document that I shared with you guys. So plenty of side effects from people taking stuff they're not supposed to. Let's see here. Another question came up. It seemed pretty clear that the Delta-8 is popular because traditional cannabis, I think if we were to decriminalize, regulate, and educate our communities about THC is only going to cause people to purchase trends. So I think here the person who wrote this is Liam, is for long story short here, it seems like he's for legalizing to kind of Delta-8 or regulating marijuana to prevent these issues from happening. The concerns I would have here, just the other side of that, marijuana is, the trend on marijuana is changing. Opinions have changed on it. I would though caution though that legalizing marijuana doesn't completely get rid of the black market. I think part of that is, I think if you look at places like California and other places on the West Coast, it's way overtaxed, extremely overtaxed. And then the black market survives because there is no tax or on the black market marijuana, and that's where some of these health effects and some of these vitamin E acetate and stuff like that is added to vapes because people, the governments get greedy and overtax the stuff. There's plenty of guerrilla grows and other illegal grows in California and Oregon. And I would be real careful too. This slippery slope that we're on here. When marijuana was first decriminalized and legalized for medicinal purposes, we were told that we would never ever legalize other drugs, and that things like heroin and cocaine and meth, we never see that legalized. And now you're starting to see in other places like Oregon, that too has become decriminalized. So I guess that's a concern I have. Though I would agree to a point, though, if you do regulate it, hopefully that would take care of some of these safety concerns that are out there. But bottom line, our state needs to do something with regulation, because we can't have this Wild West approach where people can do whatever the F they want. And now you're seeing more people, again, especially with adolescents, more of them get their hands on these products. Is Delta-8 use solely a concern with kids? Are you seeing misuse in 18+ populations? Most of the people that I see, that I come across, is still traditional marijuana. We are seeing in our high school, we just had an instance where some kids showed up with a ton of Delta-8 vape cartridges and kind of was a little cavalier about the situation and said that the stuff was legal. Most places are taking the approach that if kids show up on campus with the vapes, with Delta-8 or whatever novel tetrahydrocannabinol vapes, that they're citing them for the vaping statutes that are most places now have. Used to have tobacco ordinance violations, but now most places are switching to e-cigarette or include e-cigarette and vaping in their tobacco ordinance or in their smoking ordinance for people under the age of 21. So that's one avenue how to attack that. I don't come across too many adults that are using Delta-8 THC. Again, it's usually just a hash oil or just regular marijuana. That's the trend that I see. But some of the people that maybe are using this stuff aren't causing problems either, right? So again, most of it's going to be regular marijuana that we're coming across, but it seems with the younger people, they especially our high school, the Delta-8 vapes are popular. Okay. Okay. So again, the video that I shared earlier, they go into some of the residuals and unknowns that show up in here. And if you're not doing the proper testing procedures, you will see this, some of these pop up in your product. Other things too, if you look at recreational states, problems that they have with their THC is mold. So what's nice, I guess, what Liam brought up earlier with regulation, a place like California does a really good job with regulating cannabis. There's different types of steps and procedures that they have to do to make sure that the end product is safe for people to buy. Other states don't do as good job, but when you have those extra regulations that have, it adds to the cost of marijuana. So that's where you see some of the black market survive as well. Pesticides and such that also get added to it. That's kind of the downside of if you look at some of these illegal grows, they're adding all kinds of fertilizers and pesticides to their product. And if you're not doing a good job at looking at your data sheet, now if you go to some of these hemp expos, they'll show you some of the testing equipment that's out there. And if you're not doing a good job at looking for some of these chemicals that are in there, that's going to get passed on to the end user. Okay, diacetyl, you'll see that in a lot of vaping compounds. Diacetyl, what that is, it's a flavoring. So there's different types of vaping compounds that maybe some taste like cotton candy, some taste like sour grape, etc. So they're going to add diacetyl to that to help with the flavoring. The bad part about diacetyl is that it causes adverse lung injuries. Orville Redenbacher, if you look at their history back in the 1980s, they had workers get sick because they inhaled the diacetyl from the popcorn flavoring and they had some lung injuries as a result. But some of this stuff gets added to your vaping compounds as well. All right, so kind of wrap this up here. Delta-8 THC, I think in our state needs some cleaning up. I would agree that we need some regulation on this. At a minimum, I think a good place to start would be restricting sales to minors. That's definitely something that needs to be cleaned up. We can't have things like, we can't have a return of the Joe Camel vending machines that we saw in the 1980s. So those kind of things, again, it seems to me that the cannabis industry keeps pushing to see what they can get away with, and nobody has stopped them yet. So I think a good start, and I think most of you would agree, is there has to be some type of restriction of sales to minors with these psychotropic cannabinoids. Local ordinances, if you're going to pass a local ordinance, for now, that may be your best bet. You can restrict these sales in your city or your municipality, but if you do so, or if you were thinking of doing so, expect a fight. Again, I shared with you, there was a city in northern Wisconsin that tried this. The city council was on board, people in the community were on board, but once the ordinance was passed, and I saw the clatter on social media, people who run these cannabis businesses were worried that other cities would follow suit. So at the next meeting, people from around the state showed up and protested this ordinance, and then the city council backed down and redacted that ordinance So expect a fight, and those people got together, rounded up, and went there and got the city council there to overturn it. So if you are going to do it, just expect a fight. The Hemp Advancement Act of 2022, that's a federal law that's pending. Again, it's to clean up some of this tetrahydrocannabinol language that was in the Agricultural Improvement Act. So what they're trying to do, I think it was a Democratic representative from some East Coast state that proposed it, and it's again to clear up some of that language so there's not so much a gray area in the Agricultural Improvement Act. Oh, thank you. There's a lot of false information being spread. Thank you to Jay. Peer-reviewed studies on Delta-8 may come out. Again, this is what we're telling our DREs is there's not a lot of peer-reviewed studies on Delta-8 or novel THC impairment yet. So, but for us, it really doesn't change anything that we're doing. Again, the initial information that we're getting from the crime lab and from the state lab of hygiene that tests our OWI samples is the casework that they're seeing where we suspect Delta-8 THC is either it shows up marijuana or Delta-8 is combined with Delta-9 THC, again, which is marijuana. So we tell our officers, don't do anything different than what you're doing now. Look for cannabis impairment. If you think the person's impaired, either go with the OWI or go with the restricted controlled substance violation if you have probable cause to arrest somebody. And if you don't have probable cause, then don't arrest the person. Okay. Just like we would do with any other driving while under the influence of drug cases. Okay. And then also don't trust any THC hemp product labeling. The product may contain what's on the label and it may not. You don't know. And again, some of the concerns I shared with testing. The updated, or Charmaine says the updated definitions to the city of Ashland commercial tobacco policy covers Delta-8 or marijuana. That's awesome. I'm going to have to look your policy up and hopefully you didn't have any, it was Rhinelander that had, if you look up Rhinelander late, I think it was October, November, they passed it. And then they had some issues pop up. Like I explained, they had the Braveheart contingent show up and protest their ordinance, but hopefully you don't have the issues that you had with your ordinance. So I'll kind of wrap up again, some of my information here at the end. Again, I have a website out there right now, it's on training.com, and then the podcast there as well. So thanks for attending today. Any questions here? Otherwise, Shannon, I'll kind of let you take it over.
Yep. Nick, we have one more question from Ann Whiting from our Ashland County Health and Wellness Court.
Okay.
Ann, if you want to actually pop on and ask your question or put it in the chat.
Yeah, great. I'll just talk about it. Nick,
Okay.
Thank you. So I was wondering first, if you work with many treatment courts. I'm the coordinator for our Wellness and Recovery Court up here in Ashland County.
Okay.
And I was wondering, number one, if you work with treatment courts on this issue with Delta-8. Go ahead and answer that first.
No, I don't. We have a captain at my police department that takes care of it.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't I don't directly work with them. So
Okay. And then my other question is, we are not seeing a difference made at the labs when it comes to Delta-8 versus Delta-9. And for several reasons. I mean, it could be that they're lying to us. Yes, I know I get lied to on a regular basis, but we aren't seeing that differentiation. But people who claim that they've only taken the Delta-8 are testing positive for a much longer time than what a traditional, if somebody admits to using THC, we see that out of their system every day on our screens. But with this Delta-8, we're seeing it in their system, if they're being honest, for a much longer time.
Okay.
And then we also do along with the urine screens, that's on the urine screen. But then along with that, we also do oral screens, which test more recency, and it's showing up negative there, but it's still seeing positive. And also the sweat patches that we use are showing negative, kind of confirming what this person is saying.
Okay.
Okay, there you go.
Okay. No, thanks for sharing that with me. Yeah, when I did that project, we were unaware. I mean, it was a new trend back in late 2020. So we were unaware that some of these laboratories weren't doing a very good job separating the two. And that could have been the case why it could have been And I shared with you the one person, and I was trying, the reason I was administering some Delta-8 was I wanted to try a green lab. I want to get a green lab going in Wisconsin. So what that is, we train police officers. It's when police officers are trained in standardized field sobriety tests, we use an alcohol wet lab where we dose people on alcohol. We get them drunk, and then we have them do field sobriety. You have volunteers get drunk, and then dose them on and then have the police officers in training in an academy setting or wherever administer field sobriety tests to look for alcohol impairment. And a green lab, you're doing that with marijuana. So you dose people on different types of marijuana and then have police officers administer field sobriety tests so that they get comfortable with the field sobriety test and knowing what to look for with cannabis impairment. So I was experimenting, not myself, but experimenting to see if that would be viable with Delta-8. And then I stopped doing it once I learned more information, and I'm just waiting for laws to change here. So if marijuana would ever become legal, either medicinally or recreationally here in Wisconsin, that would be something I would pursue. But until things change on the federal level and on state, and again, some of the safety concerns that are out there, I just don't want the law offices of Ubish, Dubish, and Gubish contacting me 5 years from now and filing a lawsuit. And it's just not a thing that I want to deal with. So I'm just holding out for ethical reasons right now. But where I'm going all that is we did see the impairment. It did show up on the oral fluid test that we had as THC and and other testing. But the information you have is pretty interesting too. That's not showing up on your end, and it's staying in people's urine a little bit longer. So I don't know what the explanation for that is. And I'd be curious to find out.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Nick. It is still showing up as THC initially, but then when we try to do the testing to make sure to try and see if they are using if their use is ongoing or if it may have been one time. I mean, they're still held accountable as long as it's in their system. But yeah, it's just weird, and it's another product to have to pay attention to, and it just seems it's very disappointing that it's not regulated. So
yeah, I would agree.
Yeah. So thank you. Thanks.
You're
for
welcome.
This information.
You're welcome. Sure.
All right. Well, Nick, I know you have somewhere else that you need to get going to, and so we'll go ahead and get this wrapped up. We will send out a copy of the recording and Nick's materials along with that. We'll also post it to the Chequamegon Coalition on Emerging Drugs Facebook page. And thank you so much. Thank you very, very much for your presentation today.
You're welcome. And thank you to the Chequamegon.
Chequamegon.
Yes, I got it. I nailed it. Drug Coalition. And thanks for having me today. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.